Hello everyone, welcome to Flutter Vadodara's session, and this is our first session of 2021. Actually, it's a session after a long time, and I hope you're doing great. And yeah, I guess and oh wait a second, okay. Um, Let me introduce to a speaker for tonight. We have Abdullah here. Abdullah will be talking about testing in Flutter, writing tests in Flutter, and Abdullah is a freelance Flutter engineer who is working for a US-based firm, and he has been developing mobile apps since 3 years, and yeah, I mean, he is also, by the way, he is also, you know, completed Google Summer of Code 2020 in Dart. So you have a lot to learn. You have an expert with us. So yeah, back to you, Abdullah.
So, hello everyone, I'm Abdullah. Thanks for having me here today. So, first of all, I would like to say that that was quite a good introduction there, Harsh. So, yes, one thing we forgot to mention, so that I am a student indeed. So, I'm a senior at the College of Engineering and Research, Pune, and I'm also working as a freelance for engineer for a US-based firm. Apart from that, I also was a part of GSOC 20 under Dartlang. So yeah, that's a little bit about me, and I think we should be getting started. What do you think, Harsh?
Yeah, cool, cool.
So,
Whenever you're ready.
so just give me a second. Let me share my screen,
Sure, sure.
and we got to go. So I hope you're able to see my screen now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
cool.
So let's begin. So, so first of all, we'll be starting with testing. So before starting, I have a couple of slides to show you guys. So they are a little less, so don't get worried about them. So let's begin. So yeah, first of all, we're talking about testing in Flutter. And before learning about testing, I think we should be. It would be a good idea to see why you should be learning testing and why it would be a good idea, to learn different types of testing. Let's say. So yeah, first of all, it goes without saying that it's an added skill set to your portfolio. And apart from that, the first point here that I have written is it helps you write testable code. So whenever you learn testing and when you get the idea, when you're developing something, that you get the idea of how you should be writing code, so it will be more testable and it will be better in the long run. And in again, once you're able to write a testable code and you know the how the life cycle works and how much time it might take to test a little bit of work. So again, I would say in some ways it makes you some sort of a better developer, some sort of a better engineer. So that's one point there. And it also helps you get better jobs. So it goes without saying that, okay, if you become a better engineer, so it will be better for you to get jobs as compared to someone who does not know, let's say, crucial parts of deployment, let's say testing, or if you might have released an app. And again, for my fellow students out there, it helps you stand out as a fresh graduate. So what I mean by this is the basic problem that if you don't get if you don't have experience, you're not able to get a job, and the basic, we say it, the chicken and the egg problem. So you'll be able to solve that problem for you, and you will be able to break that barrier. Sometimes companies say that you need 1 to 3 years of experience, and if you have projects that have tests in them or you have deployed them, of course, building projects is the best way to do it. And if your projects have some sort of test in them and if you have deployed them, then it would be any day better than a normal project which is just hosted onto GitHub or somewhere else. So yeah, that were a few things that I think you should be aware of. And again, I'm also sure that I've missed a lot of things that uh, are better, that will help you and that will be an added advantage if you decide to learn testing. So yeah, if I've missed something, then you can think of, just go ahead and put them in the chat. So we'll just move forward and just jump right into testing in Flutter. So there are basic three types of testing in Flutter. So the good old unit testing, the main, where we test the business logic, and again the widget testing, where we test different types of widgets, so different types of widgets in our app or layouts, and again integration tests, where we test the app as a whole. So again, let's go ahead and take a look at each one of them. So unit testing. So what we basically do in unit test is that we test the business logic, the sample code, the simple code that we have written. It does not require any kind of, yeah, it does not require any kind of dependencies. Mostly there are, the dependencies are mocked, or it's the simplest form of testing. There's no form of UI testing involved, and it's the easiest, most basic thing. It will be, I think it will be the first type of testing that you will be doing after you have built a feature. After that, again, I forgot to mention that again, they are extremely fast and reliable as compared to any other types of testing, and they are relatively inexpensive as compared to, let's say, in maintenance cost, as compared to the different types of testing that we'll be taking a look at further. So the next one is widget testing. So what widget testing basically involves is that how we can test different widgets. So everything in Flutter is a widget, right? So how we'll be testing different widgets of our app, or maybe layouts. Okay, layouts are also a widget. So how we'll be testing those layouts, how we'll be I'll be testing their implementation. If say, let's say a simple layout is working properly, or let's say a widget is working properly, that's basically what we do in widget testing. And they are faster than integration testing, which we'll be taking a look again in the further. And they are a little expensive as compared to normal unit tests, but I think they are good to go. So let's move forward. The next one is integration testing. So this is the best, I would say. These are the alternatives. I would say these are the Flutter version of Espresso test for Android, or I don't know what it's called. I don't really remember actually what it's called for iOS. But yeah, these integration tests basically test the app as a whole and how they usually work. And they are performed on real device or simulators, but the best practice is to use them on real device, because you'll get the best idea of how your apps work in production and how they work, how they perform. And they allow you to do a little bit of performance profiling and check how, again, the performance of the apps is. And yeah, one new addition to integration testing that was given about, I think, about a month ago, is that there's a new sample. So before, we used to use something called a tool called Flutter driver. So these were Flutter driver tests, and they were a lot different than the normal widget testing framework that we have. And so it was a little difficult because the matches and things like that were different. And it wasn't a very good experience. So right now what they have done is they have built a new package that resembles a lot with the Flutter testing framework, and it also allows you to deploy your tests on Firebase Test Lab. So you have a complete suite, you have a complete let's say system of how you have a complete I don't really know what to say, but you have set up by Firebase Test Lab, and you can go ahead and deploy your test. They have a lot of devices, iOS and Android, and you can just go ahead, and it's a much better experience with integration test, the integration test package, as compared to what it was with normal Flutter driver test. So one thing to mention is that this integration test package does make use of Flutter driver to run the app and drive it onto the app itself. And yeah, and there was one more problem with Flutter driver, was that to control the test, we needed a physical, a computer device, I would say a system, rather than the device. Let's say the mobile device, the device on which the tests are being performed, wasn't able to control the test. So that's one thing that has changed in the integration test package, and it now handles everything on its own. So yeah, that's a little bit about integration testing, and let's see what we have next. So I think we'd be happy to know that those were the only slides that we had for today's event. And let's now jump right into the code. So here, for today's example, what I have is it's the same example that I had built for my GSOC project. So it is indeed a Flutter testing sample. And to be honest, I couldn't think of a simpler way to demonstrate how to test Flutter applications. So that's why I've used. So basically, what it is that there's a simple list of items that shows you a simple um, list. And again, what we can do is you can just go ahead and click here and add these items to the favorites. And you can go ahead and look at the favorites and just remove them. And if you don't have any item, it just shows you no buttons added. And whenever you perform an action, it also shows you a snack bar. So that's one more thing. And again, let's take a look at the code here. So just let me hide it. Okay, so this is basically the testing app, and I just want one thing again I would like to mention is that we are using provider package here, and just start. Let's start by taking a look at the models. And right now we just have a favorites list here. So there are just basically two actions here: adding an item and removing an item. So that's basically it. And there are again two screens. One's the home screen, which you can see right now, and what we have is just a simple layout here. And we have a list view builder where we call our item tile. And item tile, what it does is it just checks with the provider that if that item is present in the favorites list, then you need to show a filled icon. Filled, I don't know what the exact name for it is. Yeah, so a favorite icon. And if it's not there, there's a favorite icon with border. It's not filled. And yeah, that's basically it for this screen. And just take a look at favorite screen as well. So here again, we have the favorite screen, and we are just taking a look at, we just grabbing those items, taking the list from the provider and just displaying it with the list view builder. So let's just start by writing tests. So the basic convention that we follow in Flutter testing is that whichever file we need to test, we just append a suffix of underscore test with it. So let's say if you are testing here favorites dot dot, so the testing file here for that would be favorites dot test, favorites underscore test dot dot. And yeah, that's how we begin. So let's just begin and start writing our test. So let me just go ahead and set this thing. Yeah. So as like every Dart program, it starts with void main, and then after that we just need to. So there's one thing that whenever we're performing a test, we can group those similar kind of tests into a separate group. So what this group does is it takes the name of the group and it takes in again a callback of different test cases. So we'll just go ahead and make that as well. So yeah, before that, we'll just taking an object of the model so that we'll be able to start with that. So for right now, basic code, just to call back that, recall that we are starting with the unit test. And right now we are creating a unit test for the favorites model. And let's just continue now. So we need to create a test case for it. So the first test case, so what I can think of is again, basically what a unit test does, it tests the methods and classes. So classes and methods. So here right now we have two methods, add and remove. So what we'll be doing is basically testing those two methods and see whether if they work properly or not. So the first test case is just to test the add method. So right now again the syntax of the add method is just the message that you want to show on the command line and followed by a callback function that where you will performing the exact test action. So let's get just go ahead and I'll be creating a number, declaring a number that will be adding. Again, we'll be adding that to the favorites list. And so here's the main part where we test that, where we verify if the exact action happened or not. So let's say the expect function in some other programming languages also use assert. So what this does is that it takes two parameters and it checks whether those two are equal or not. Basically, there are also a set of matchers that we can use, but we'll be using that further in this tonight. So let's see how it goes. And yeah, so yeah, right now what we're testing is that if the favorites item, a favorites list, yeah, if the favorites list contains this number, then the test passed. That's what we're trying to say. So if the first parameter is equal to the second parameter, then the test passes or the test fails. So let's just go ahead and see what we have for the second test case. So it's basically the same. And what we're testing is that, first of all, to remove an item, first we need to add an item. So right now we are just going ahead and adding that. And after that, we're also testing, after that, we are just testing whether the atom contains or not. So we'll just add it into the item and check once, and again we'll remove it from the item and check again. So yeah, that is the second test case. We just went ahead and removed it from the favorites list, and now we are testing that if it does not contain, that means uh, if favorites or items or contains returns false, that means the test pass. So now let's go ahead and run that test and see how we'll be able to run it. So the basic command that we use for to run Flutter test is again Flutter test and followed by the file name that we're trying to test. So right now we have test, and again our test directory is in models and our file name is favorites list dot favorites test dot. So let's just go ahead and run that test and see how we can get an output. So we got the message right here is that it says that all tests pass. So that was a basic look at how unit tests work. So pretty simple, pretty basic how everything works. And if you need some kind of dependencies here, most of them are mocked. There's a package called Mockito and tons of other resources as well, which you can use. And you can just go ahead and play around with it and see how you like it. So next we have the favorite star. Next we have widget test. So let's just jump right into them and see what we have. So again, we have the files here, favorites.dart and home.dart. One thing you can do is you can follow the exact same directory structures like your lib directory. But as the sample is pretty basic, I haven't followed the exact same structure, but it is fairly similar. So let's just go ahead and again continue with that. So yeah, I think one thing we forgot right here is that, let me see. Yeah, so we'll just start with the home test.dart. And again, as usual, the INI test start with the main function. And here again, yeah, we can group the test widget test as well. Yeah, and the test cases for writing a widget test are a little different. It's just that instead of having a normal callback, the callback for the widget test take a parameter of the widget tester type. So whatever action we need to perform on the app, we perform it using this. That may be tapping on the screen, scrolling, or entering text or anything, things like that. Everything is performed using this item. So that's how we make use of it, and let's just see how it's done. So we'll just go ahead and see, build ahead. And so right now our first test case is testing if the list view shows up. So right now what we have done is that to test a widget, first of all we need to trigger a widget and just build it onto the app. So what this pump widget function does is it calls a widget and it triggers a frame. So whatever widget you can call here right now. And the reason why we are using a method right here is that we are testing that widget individually. So if you take a look at this method, create home screen, is that we are just creating again change notify provider because we're using the provider package. And again, we are indeed creating differently. We are doing it explicitly on our own rather than just calling our testing app. So what's here, then calling our testing app widget right here in the main class, the main file. That is because we need to test them individually. You can surely go ahead and do that, but if in your use case you need to test them individually, this is one way of doing it. Some of the people, what they like to do is just like to call the main method here, a main class here, and again go ahead and do app.main. So how they do it is they'll just import main.dart as main. Yeah, I just forgot to close this here. Yeah, yeah. And what they do is, yes, as app, sorry. So what they do is they call app.main, and this is the same as doing pump widget, but right now you're triggering the app from its declaration standpoint of itself and then testing them individually. So whatever use cases, likewise, you can go ahead and perform your test case. So right now let's begin with our first test case, which is testing if the list view shows up. So basically how we are going to do that is we're just going to uh, put in a set of matchers and a set of finders. So what finder does is that it finds widgets on the, let's say, on the screen, and there are some certain number of steps how you can find them. So there are different types. You can find them by icon, by key, by type. The most common one is by text, and the one we are using right here is by type. So whatever the class name is, uh, using that we can just go ahead and find them. So right now we are just going ahead and testing that if the list view shows up or not. That's just basic simple test case before we move forward. That before moving on forward, we just have to verify that okay, the main action that we'll be performing on, is that thing visible or not. So yes, let's go ahead and test this app, and we'll just go ahead and run that test case. And let's see how it goes. So test.start, and let's just go ahead and test it. So yeah, the test case pass. And I want to show you one more thing, is that what we're going to do is I'll show you one more trick. The way I like running widget test is using simulators. I usually use a physical device, but right now I do not have some kind of screen mirroring setup. So I'm just using a simulator right now. And let's just go ahead and open that using a simulator. So what I had run is Flutter and basically how you run normal Flutter apps using the simulator is basically the same thing. Just after that, you need to add the path, the destination of the file which you want to run. So it takes a little bit of time, like the initial build of any Flutter app. So right now we are good to go. So the main thing that why we are using this is that we get to use hot reload. Oh, not really hot reload, but yeah, we get a chance to use hot restart. So we are a lot efficient in developing tests here, and we are a lot faster. So let's say what the next test case will be. So let's just go ahead, and right now we are planning on testing scrolling. So if the app scrolls properly and if different widgets appear, so how we'll be testing that is we'll just go ahead and check if and the item 0 appears in the screen. Let's say I mentioned that find.text. So using this matcher, we'll see if item 0 finds one widget. So yeah, I forgot to mention about this. Finds one widget is a matcher provided by the widget testing framework. So there are a lot of matchers. Finds one widgets, finds n widgets, finds nothing. There are a lot of widgets there, and you can just go ahead and see what suits best for your test case, and eventually you can just go ahead and make use of that accordingly. So we'll just go ahead and uh, move forward. So the main action that we'll be performing right now is fling. So what's fling is, it's nothing but just scrolling in a fast way. So there are a number of parameters here. Is first of all, we need to select what type of widget, which widget. So again, we are doing a finder right here. So again, we are giving it our list view. So we need to, what the widget testing will do is just go ahead and find a list view on the screen, and if whenever they find the list view, we'll be performing that action on that. So again, the second parameter of fling method is offset, that in which way do you want the item to scroll. So minus 200 means vertically down, so it will be scrolling down vertically, and again this 3000 is the speed in which you want it to scroll. You can just go ahead and scroll it in whatever way you want, and just let's see how it works. And yeah, the next line is pump and center. What this does, it goes ahead and tells the widget testing frameworks is, hey, whatever actions that I have said you, let's say tap or fling or whatever is there, just go ahead and perform those actions. So let's just go ahead and see uh, what we have to do next. So after that, when we scroll that, then we'll be testing if that item 0 still appears on the screen. So if item 0 is first present on the screen and we scroll down, and what it normally should do is it should disappear. So if it disappears, that means that our test is working properly. So let's just go ahead and test that now. And with the power of hot restart, I think we should be just able to do it within a matter of seconds. So as I mentioned, now we just run the test and went ahead. For those who missed it, just one more time, I'll just go ahead and run it and see. So for the first test case run, and the second test case has run as well, and indeed the test, all the test cases passed. So yeah, it's pretty fast, and it's again, it's a really good thing that you can just go ahead, and how the hot restart functionality extends to the widget testing framework as well. So I think it's really fun. And one thing that I think a lot of people miss is that they, those especially who those have those who haven't seen how unit tests or how UI tests are performed, is that it's, they're really fun to watch, at least at the beginning. Then maybe it's, if you go ahead and show them to a non-technical person, and if if you deploy them on a physical device, they'll just get amazed at how that app, how that device is working on its own without you even touching it. So I think they're fun to watch. So yeah, so let's just move forward and go ahead with our next test case. So now we'll be testing the icon buttons. So the buttons which we have right here, we'll be testing if those buttons perform their intended action or not. So how we'll be doing that is, we'll be just going ahead and again, as the previous test case, we'll be pumping the widget, and again, and we'll just calling the create home screen, and we'll be seeing there. After that, what we'll be doing is, we'll be finding that item. So we'll be, first of all, we'll be seeing if that filled icon appears or not. So if the app is, if it's a fresh start of the app, there won't be any there won't be any favorites item there. So all these uh, icons will be bordered icons rather than filled icons. So we won't be able to find anything, and hence the matcher here finds nothing. So if it finds an item, again, this line will fail and the test will fail. In I think, should I show you something of how it fails? Finds one widget, and I'll just save it, and just go ahead and run that. So as you can see right now, that the test has failed, and you'll be able to see that error message. So right now, what I can see right now, the for this test failure object was thrown running a test. An actual widget creators with icon data, and yeah, which means none were found, but one was expected. So right now, as you can see, that we were expecting it to find one widget, but it wasn't able to find one. So it basically failed. So right now I have fixed that, and it again changed to find nothing. And right now what I've done is that we'll be taking the help of the tester here, and we'll be tapping onto one of those icons. So one thing I'd like to mention is that if you call something, so some sort of thing using the finders, if there are multiple items present that can be found using those finders, let's say if there's a type or of icon, there'll be a list that will be returned to you rather than just an object. So if you perform option actions on that, you might get an error in some cases, not always, but in some cases. So in cases there where there is a potential that you might get a number of items, it's best to use the first getter there and perform that action on it, that itself. And after that, we are also using we're also performing pump and settle, and here we are giving it a duration. So there are a couple of optional parameters here for the pump and settle method, is that we can wait for some time and see. So the reason I'm doing it here is that if you might have observed while I was showing you the app initially, that whenever you click on any item, there's a snack bar show. So that's what we are going to do next, is that we are going to verify if that snack bar has appeared and the text we are expecting is shown to the user or not. So how we do it is basically we test that using a finder, that find.text added to favorites, the exact same string which we are looking for. And if we try to pair it up with a matcher, which is finds one widget. Okay, so let's just go ahead and see what else we have. And yeah, so let's just move forward and see what we have further on in the test case. So after you click on a finder, the next thing that happens is that one of those icons turns into a filled icon. So icons.favorite rather than icons.favorite border. So again, we need to verify how that works. And see how that if such an icon has appeared. So let's just go ahead and run that test and see if everything works. So let me just clear it first and just, oh yeah, I by mistake I just pressed hot reload instead of hot restart. So let's just see how this works. Okay, so I think I'll need to quit that. Yeah. So yeah, that's one thing. Just let me go ahead and run it again. I by mistakenly I just uh, hit R instead of Shift R. So that's one problem that I faced right now. So let's just go over it and wait for it to rebuild. So did I miss anything? I'll just wait for it to build till then. Yeah. So as you can see here, the test has passed. So let's just go ahead and run it again for you to see. So started scrolling and it again pressed the icon, it appeared, and eventually we got the message that all tests passed. So yeah, that was how we'll test if then these icon buttons and if those work properly or not. So we also have one last test case for the specific layout, which is uh, I think I forgot some part of it. So it was just removing it and just testing that it works or not. So let's just go ahead and see what we have for the next test case. So what it does, it tests that if the icon button is if the item is removed or not. So right now, before we just tested if the adding functionality is working, but now we'll also test if they are basically working with the removing functionality. When we click on it again, it should be removed. So we'll just go ahead and test if that works as well. So yeah, just go ahead and hot restart, and item was added, and then the item was removed, and then you got it all test passed, and that worked beautifully. So let's just go ahead and jump into our next layout for today, which is the favorites list. So again, as usual, like any other Flutter project, it starts with like any other Dart project, not really a Flutter project. Like any Dart program, it starts with void main. And again, you guessed it, a group here again, and that group will be taking in two parameters. The first one will be the message that we put, and again the callback, and again we'll be calling the first test case, which will be test widgets, and we'll be pumping the our favorite screen here. So we have done a little bit changes here. We have created we have declared the favorites list here, and that is because we need to perform actions on this list. So as you can see, if you recall, in our favorites list, if in our favorites screen there, we did not have any option to add anything. So if anything appears, uh, we can't really add anything directly using that specific layout itself. So what we'll be doing is we'll be making use of this favorites list object, and we'll be adding things manually and seeing if those things work. So let's just go ahead and our first test case for this layout, and which is test if placeholder. So our first test case, test if that so what the favorites list does is it does not, if it does not have any item, it shows this message that no favorites added. So if it's empty, it just shows that message, and if it's not, it shows that item. So that's the basic simple old test case that we'll be testing and we'll be taking a look at. I think what we can do is just we can go ahead and uh, go ahead and implement our next second test case as well, and we'll be testing both of them at the same time. So let's just go ahead and test if our list view shows up. And yeah, so basically to test that, what we want is we need to add a couple of items. So if items are not added, so if you take a look right here on the favorite screen, so if let's see here, what it says is that it checks if the list items is not empty. At that time you need to show a list view, otherwise you need to show a text that no favorites added. So Again, if the favorites list appears, that means this should not appear. So let's just go ahead and continue with our test case. So here we have a function that will be adding those items. So here we have a loop that just goes ahead and adds a number of items to this object, the favorites list, and just perform it does this thing and it's called here. So let's just go ahead and call that and see if that works. So yeah, so this is how we test that if that list view shows up, and let's just see how if it's working properly. So we need to quit the app for now, and we need to test our favorites. So let's go ahead and run that. So yeah, I hit Flutter test instead of Flutter run here. So my bad. Yes. So it had shown all tests passed. So data test is going to pass, but it's going to take a look at it. We're just going to run it anyway. So let's just wait for it to build. So yeah, as you can see, all tests passed. Can't really see, yeah. So the test messages are here. So let me just clean that up and just run it one more time. So the first test case run, second one run, again the test case passed. It's really fast. It operates really fast. You're not really able to see it. So let's just go ahead and write our second next test case for this file, which is testing if the remove button works. So here we have a set of buttons here where we can, if we click, the item gets removed. So that's what we'll be doing now, and we'll be removing that. So basically, for removing, we're just going ahead and creating that uh, items. We'll be pumping the widget. We'll be adding those items, and next what we do is we'll be using a finder, and we'll be seeing the length of icons presented. So basically, what we are doing is we are testing how many numbers are there, how many number of icons are present there on the screen. So how we do this is with tester.widget list. So what it does, it takes in a number of finders, in makes a list of them. And how we do that is again find by icons.close. So right now, as I mentioned, we need to perform first action there. So right now, if we needed to perform an action of only one thing, would have needed to add dot first here, but we do. So that's how we do it right now. And again, we'll be just taking the length of what it is right now, and then what we'll be doing is we'll be just clicking on that item and we'll be removing it, and then we'll be comparing if that specific number, let's say we will get the number of items at that time here, and we'll be comparing it with the number of items present after that action is done, and we're seeing is if it's less than the previous one or not. So how we do that is, again, we go ahead and check the number of items present there using same process, and we test it, we compare it with the previous number of items. So total items here we have, and again we have another matcher here is less than. So what it does is that it compares the first finder, and it checks if the thing that we are comparing it to is less than the matcher, or less than the second item that we are providing it. So yeah, and again, we also have a snack bar that shows up whenever we remove an item. So yeah, that's basically it. And how we test these widgets. So let's just go ahead and see if those work properly. So as expected, those things worked, and what they did is that all these actions performed. So it just went ahead, and it's really fast. If you want, you can just go ahead and provide a delay of these things, future or delayed, or anyhow you like it. Just go ahead and play with it, and you'll be able to see how it works. Just any way that you think that you'll be able to understand it better, just go ahead and the best way to learn anything is like implementing it, right? So just go ahead and jump into the code and take it for a spin and do some changes here and there and see how it works. So now we are done with the widget tests, and now let's take a look at the integration tests. So for the integration test, we need a couple of dependencies here. In fact, we need them for normal ones as well. So what we need is the Flutter driver dependency to drive the app on the device, the test dependency, and yeah, that's basically it. So let's just go ahead and start with our test. So the what we have created done is here is that I've created a directory which is integration test dot, and we'll just pasting all those files here, all those files right here. So there are two main files involved when you're writing an integration test. One is the driver and the second is the target. So whatever the driver just loads the integration driver to your app and just loads the app and just tells the test that okay, I'm ready to run, just go ahead and execute all those tests and see if they run. And the other file that contains the actual testing logic behind it. So we'll just start and with our driver. So let's just declare that. So as usual, it starts with void main. Then what it does, it calls the integration driver function. So the integration test driver is initiated here and it starts working. And once it does that, whatever test we have provided, it starts running as well. So let's just go ahead and start with our test. Again, you guessed it, it starts with void main. And again, this also allows the integration test framework. So as I mentioned, so the integration test package is a lot similar to the widget testing framework now. The Flutter driver test had a little bit of differences there, and it was a little complex as compared to this. But right now, what they've done is they have done a great job rebuilding all those testing techniques, and I think it's really it's a consistent experience. Experience testing different kinds of things. So let's just go ahead and move forward with our integration test. So right now what I've done is that I have initialized we have initialized the driver there. So and again we are testing, we are verifying if that driver is initialized or not. So one way you can do is you can just go ahead and do it in setup all. So this is one way of doing it. But while I was trying to do it, I don't know, for some reason it was giving me an error and the test was failing. So I think it would be a good idea to file an issue. But I'll just go ahead and take a look at that later on. But for right now, we'll just go ahead and continue it in this way. So we'll just go ahead and ensure that it's initialized, and we'll be writing out the first test case. Again, the basic test case, test widgets, first parameter, the message that you want to show. Second one is the callback. Again, widget tester is there. Again, we'll be calling pump widget here. And right now, what we have done is we are testing we're calling the app directly. So if you remember, I mentioned that what integration tests do is that they test the app as a whole. So we don't need to test those widgets separately. We do not have a need to separate them out and create any function like before, like we did in our widget test. So we'll just go ahead and simply move forward. And our first test case is finding an item in the list. So right now what we'll be doing is we'll be testing if a specific item is present in the list or not. And the way that I have implemented it is that we'll just, so the icon, the item right here is 25. So there's a high chance that item does not appear here. So what we'll be doing is this, we'll be going ahead and scrolling that item. So how we are doing that is scrolling through the list. We're just going ahead and giving it. So there's this item, there's this action that we can perform. The tester is scroll until visible. So it takes in two parameters. The first one is the finder, the item that we're trying to find, and the delta in which we want to scroll it. So let's say, how fast do you want to scroll in each iteration? So if 500 is there, yeah, it will have a decent speed. If you increase it, it will be faster, and likewise. And then what we'll be doing is, so here we have used finder by key. So if you have a good amount, I would say, if you have been working with Flutter for a while, you might know that Flutter has an option to use keys to find widgets in the tree. So if you take a look at our app here, yeah, so in our home file we have number of items. We have provided keys here. We have provided their value keys, which is nothing but the text followed by the item number. So we'll just making use of these uh, keys, and we also have a key for the icons. So again, we'll be taking a use of making use of that as well in the future. So let's just go ahead and continue, and let's see. So so this is the second test case. So yeah, basically what we have done is that just went ahead and scroll down until it becomes visible. So if the user is able to, if the testing framework is able to find a key named test underscore 25, so it will stop scrolling there, and we need to perform whatever action we want there. So we'll be just verifying if that item has that specific text or not. So one way we can do that is, there's this area called widget. So what you can do is, if you pass a parameter to this widget, you'll be able to get the exact widget that performs that we got using that finder, that performs that action. So the text widget right here, if you take a look at text, you will see that it has number of fields. So the data field here, which where we um, pass the exact data that we're going to show, the exact string. So we'll be able to we'll be able to get a hold of that, get access to it, and see if that is equal or not. So we'll just go ahead and test. We'll just compare those things, and if they are equal, then our test will pass. And so that was our first test case. So the next test case is nothing but we'll be testing our icon buttons, and we'll be seeing if those icons are appearing or not, so and working properly or not. So again, we have used the same approach. We are using value keys here, and let's just go ahead and move around with our test case. So what we do is just go ahead. I think so. What we are doing is we are following the same approach that we followed to testing icon buttons in our widget test. So that's the same approach. What we are doing is, but instead of finding them by icon, we are finding them by keys. So just to show you guys a different way of doing it, I just implemented it in a different way. So again, we are going it and creating a finder out of it, and the reason I'm creating a finder is because we are using it multiple times, so it will be easier. And so just going ahead and tapping that item, and again we'll be calling pump and settle. Again, it resembles what we did in the which our widget test is basically the exact same. So after that, what we do is we just go ahead and tap that icon, and we verify if that snack bar shows up saying finds one widget. And then again, we also go ahead and tap to it again, and if we verify if it shows remove from favorites. So yeah, that was our second test case. So let's just go ahead and run our file, run our test. So let me just close this for a while. And how we test integration test is that we use the drive command. So Flutter followed by drive, and we give them our driver as well as our target. So hyphen hyphen driver. Um, let me see. Hmm, Flutter drive in doing something wrong. Hmm, Integration test. Driver.test is by followed by target is integration test slash app test dot dart. We'll wait for it. Let's see if So integration tests to take some time to build, and we can't use hot reload there. So that's one thing that you need to take care of, and you have to work with it how it is. Maybe I don't know if they can get some way to get that working in the future versions, but right now they don't. And one difference here is that it uses the entire screen as than what the widget testing framework did. So yeah, so for the people who missed it, in fact I missed it too, so let's just run it again, see how it works. So just scroll through the item, it found that item and just went ahead and tested that as well. So yeah, so all the tests have passed. So yeah, that was it. That was how we perform that test. And now let's go ahead and see what the further test cases that we have for this specific testing file. So right now we are testing if is that when we click on an item, we'll be verifying if that item really gets added to the list or not. So again, we are testing the app as a whole. So we'll be also testing that if we click on an item and if it's appearing there or not. So the way we do it is we just go ahead and tap onto an item and we add it in the same way we did it in our previous test case. So we just go ahead and we choose a value key, we create a finder for it, and we tap onto that item, which is icon number 5, and we go ahead and pump and settle, that means perform that action. And here now we open the favorites list, and again we'll be testing that if it appears there or not. After that, what we do is we go ahead and verify if that item appeared or not. So the next one is, again in the same way, we got the access to the data field here, there, here. In the same way we are going to take, so just go ahead and pass that finder to it, and then we just go ahead and verify if that data field is same to what we have passed. So here we have used a matcher called equals, so it does nothing but it takes a look at the first parameter and it checks if that is equal to the match that we have given. So the final test case that we have for this file is testing the remove button. So again, it goes without saying what we're doing is removing that item, and we'll be seeing if that item still appears or not. So let's see. For the right now, what we do is we just go ahead and add that item, we open favorites, and then we remove that item, and if we test that if that item got removed or not. So let's just go ahead and run those tests and see how they work. So it went ahead and from the first test case and it removed an item, and then it's testing icon buttons. So yeah, went really fast. So let's just go ahead and run it one more time. So basically added that and removed it, and now it's tested the remove button as well. So basically, it's really difficult to observe if that it's working properly. But basically, it's a better idea if you want to really see what it does is that you just slow it down and put delays in between steps, and that way you will be able to see with your eyes. Okay, so now we have the final testing file that we have, which is a performance test that we have for tonight, and then we'll be done. So let's just go ahead and start with it. So again, you guys did, you saw it coming. void main again. So there's one thing that for performance test we need to do differently is that we need to change the frame policy in which that test runs. So that way we are able to test each and every frame. Other than that, what happens is that there's some sort of frame drops uh, if we don't use this approach. So what we basically do is, if you take a look at our previous file, what we were doing is that we were just going ahead and just verifying it by calling ensure initialized. But right now what we're doing is that we are creating storing a variable out of it. We're creating, and we'll be using this to monitor the performance and to see how those things really how the app really works and how its performance is. So there are different ways in which we can run an app. So the one we are using right now is fully live. One is benchmarking. Every other uh, every other uh, every other type has its own approach and its own use case. So you need to just go ahead and figure out what is your use case and choose one accordingly. So right now what we can do is just go ahead and continue and define our first test case, and it will be a scrolling test. Right now we'll be testing how fast does the scrolling work, and if is there a frame drop or things like that in the basic scrolling. So and how those items appear. So what we'll be doing is we'll be scrolling really fast down. We'll be scrolling all the way down really fast, and then we'll be scrolling way back up all the way, and we'll be seeing how did the app perform and whether any frame drops or things like that. So how we do it is just go ahead and create. Again, we need finders for that. So we need the list finder, and we need a scroller. So how we get a scroller is that, again, you must have used scroll controllers while developing apps. So the same way we got the data field from the text widget, using the same approach, we're finding giving using the same approach to get the scroll controller from that list finder. So let's just go ahead and continue, and we'll be calling binding.trace action. So what this trace action method does is this function just goes ahead and it gives us a timeline of whatever the actions we perform. So there are a couple of parameters passed here, which is again the callback function in which we need to perform all the actions, and the report key. So whatever the data will be generated, whatever the report will be generated from this function, it will have the key called scrolling underscore timeline. So that's how we do it, and we get a timeline out of it. And there's also one way of doing it, which is watch performance. So what this does is that it gives us a summary of the timeline. So this timeline will also have data that this summary has. I just used it so that you have different approach and different ways of uh, making use of things which you might need for your use case. So yeah, you can just extract this timeline out of this, or you can just extract this summary out of this timeline. But just to let you know, there are two different ways of doing it. I have just used both of them here, and I've nested them into one another, not one another, into the first one. So let's just go ahead and animate. So you might have used this function called animate to, so the basic scroll controller function which we use while developing apps. So it's the basic same one. So animate to, and what direction that you want, it basically does in normal direction itself, but what's the offset basically, and how fast you want it to scroll, and what curve you want it. So it's basically the same one. And here we also have a key for the summary that I forgot to mention before, is that it also returns a key. So what these keys basically happen is these keys are reported to this driver file. So this integration driver here, right here, all these keys are reported here, and we'll be taking a look at them further. But right now, just go ahead and continue. And what this driver does is they just go ahead and performs action on that whatever operation we want on that data. So let's just go ahead. Right now, what we have done is that we have just performed and implemented how we need to scroll down, and now we need to do it. We need to scroll back up. So we'll be doing exact opposite of that. So let's just go ahead and animate to and scroll the reverse. So right before that we used plus 7,000. Right now we are using negative 7,000. So again, we're calling pump and settle, and that's how our first test case would look. And the next test case will be testing how long does it take for it to perform those actions. So the actions, the operations that we have is add and remove, and basically we're testing all those icon buttons here, and we'll be removing them. So again, I've used the same two methods there: trace action, watch performance. So let's just jump into their implementation, and yeah. So right now in this test case, we'll be making use of those keys. So I'll just creating a simple array of items, and 0, 1, 2, and 3. And what we're doing is we're tapping on them, and uh, we'll be we'll be verifying if this test text was appeared or not. Again, find our text. It should be pretty familiar to you right now. So let's go ahead and implement the rest of our test case. And then what we do is we open the favorites list, and then we'll be verifying if that appears there. Not really verifying it, we'll be removing it from there. So yeah. So basically, we have done the same thing. Instead of passing in the normal icon values, we are passing in the remove icon value keys, and we are again following that and throwing them into a loop and just tapping onto each icon one by one and just testing if that icon gets removed or not. So let's just go ahead and run this test. So before running that test, I need to show you one more thing, is that we can indeed configure how we want our data to be used that we have provided from this test file. So I'll just go ahead and show that to you. So there's a parameter called response data callback. You can provide a callback to this, how we want that data to be performed, how what action do you want it to perform. So basically, we're just checking if there's a specific data provided by the test file or not. So if there is, we'll be writing that on the disk, else we'll be skipping it. So because for our app test, there wasn't any data that we need to generate, but right now here it does have. So we'll just go ahead and we'll just write that response to the disk. So this data is nothing but a map. So it's a map for string dynamic. So there can be different types of things. So what we do is just go ahead and take each and every entry of that map, and we call this a write response data function. So what this function does is it creates a file onto the local disk, and it stores the data, and it takes in the test output file name. So what file name will be giving it is the entry.key. So these keys are nothing but the keys that we provided here, the report keys. And again, we'll be we'll be giving them that file name, and the data will be nothing but what they have returned. So that's just basically it, and I think we have written our complete test case, and let's just go ahead and run that. Before that, what I would like to do is I would just like to just go ahead and clean, so that we just go ahead and delete any of those files that were created by the our app test, and we'll keep an empty room for performance test. So I'll just replace this with perf test dot, which is our file name, and everything else remains the same. And just go ahead and run that, and just wait for it to build. So yeah, now we are. So now it's almost 8:05, and we're almost done. This is the last thing that we'll be taking a look at. And yeah, so just let me tell you, I just forgot to tell you that the main reason why we are doing this. So once we create this, and once we run that performance test and we create a file out of it, uh, what we can do is we can just go ahead and verify if that, and just go ahead for the evaluated. So let's just go ahead and see, take a look at this test, and I'll just explain that thing again. So it's performed properly, test finished, all tests passed. Just go ahead and run that one last time. Let's wait for it to run. So started scrolling, and then it's switching to the next one. So yes, perform that test, and yeah. So let's just get back, and I'll tell you the reason behind why we are using this approach and why we're doing it manually. So if we do these things manually, what we can do is that we'll be getting those files generated out of our framework, and we can just go ahead and further evaluate our performance. So the timeline that we are providing here by the trace action function and the watch performance function, we can just go ahead and verify if those verify our performance, not really verify, rather I should say evaluate. So we can go ahead and evaluate the performance and how those things work. And let's just go ahead and see for ourselves how does that look. So I'll just go ahead and open those files here. So they get generated right here. So these are the files that we generated. So the first one was the scrolling summary, scrolling timeline, and favorites operation, and favorites operation summary. So a JSON file gets generated out of it. And what we can do is we can just go ahead and use Chrome's tracing tools to further evaluate those things. Um, should I show that to you now? I don't know. Chrome colon slash slash. Wait a minute. I think it's tracing. Yeah, it's tracing, and you actually need to load a file right here. So testing app, build, and yeah, favorites timeline. Open. So see, right now we get a flame chart here, and we can just go ahead and further evaluate how that things works, how those things work, and see how the performance actually is. So if you are some sort of an expert here, and if you want to see if those things perform, then you can just go ahead and make use of this and go ahead and verify how your performance was. And one last thing that I forgot to show is that you can also test all the files in the test directory, this one. So it won't only inside this directory. So by just running the Flutter test command, nothing else. Go ahead and run Flutter test, and it will test all those files here inside this directory. It won't perform the integration tests, but it will run all those. So, so as you can see, all tests passed, and that's how we can perform with one just single command. You can perform all those tests. You can go ahead and run them, and yeah. There's also one more thing, how usual some companies that claim that we have a specific number of coverage, let's say test coverage, that they give you a small percentage that 100% we provide 100% of code coverage and 90% of code coverage, that is. So what they mean by that is that how what percent of their code is actually tested, and they have written tests for what. So how you can generate those tests is just running flutter test hyphen hyphen coverage. So what it basically does is it just runs the test, and it creates a report out of them, and it just goes ahead and stores them. And you can see a coverage directory here, and how we can uh, open it is that we need a tool called HTML. If I'm not wrong, I haven't used this for a long time. So let's just see if I'm able to use it. So this file was generated. And yeah, you need a tool called LCOV there. So you can install it like using just brew install LCOV or apt install. If you're on Windows, I'm sorry, but you can just find them from they're just one Google search away from you. I'm sure that there must be some way of getting those things installed. So how we can generate that is just performing. We'll be giving it an output of /index dot HTML. If I'm doing it correctly, must be generated. So let's just go ahead, take a look at. So it's better that I open it from here itself. So yeah, here we have the coverage file. Yeah. So here you can see index.html. If we open it, you can see that we have 97%. Not bad. Let's just go ahead and check where we have a room for improvement. So screens page has only here home dot dot. Yeah, so the home dot dot is only 94% coverage. So here we have room for improvement. So the on pressed property of the flat button. So the button which appears here. So do we have the emulator here open? I don't know if it's still run. Yeah, so this button right here, the on pressed, does not have any kind of test latency. So if you're willing to contribute, we'll be happy to have you there, and just go ahead and we'll just show you where it lies there on the official testing page. If you want to take a look at this sample, so it will be here at flutter.com/flutter/samples, and there just show that to you. Just you need to scroll down and open widget test, not widget testing app. So not really the testing app, what am I saying? The testing app, and here you'll be able to see the sample that we had gone through this evening, and then we'll be able to see all sorts of steps and how to run those tests. Yeah, one thing I would like to point out is that this sample is in fact right now using the Flutter driver test instead of the integration test package. I have a pull request created that will shortly be merged. So it's under review and it will be merged soon. And if you like to learn step by step rather than just taking a look at a sample, there's also a code lab that I had written. So again, so this code lab, this was again a part of my summer of code project. So there I had also authored this code lab. So this just takes you step by step and uh, goes ahead and builds that app, and there's different types of testing involved here as well. The basic test, there's a simple difference here that we are just using a single test rather than separating out that integration test and the performance test, the normal app test and performance test. And yeah, and this also is using the Flutter driver as of now, and it will shortly be updated. But whenever it gets updated, you'll be able to see a different date here. So yeah, that's basically it from my side, and I hope you had a good time. And it was again my first online talk apart from work, so I think hopefully you guys did not get bored, and I hope it was good.
Yeah, actually, it was great, Abdullah. Thank you very much for your session. I enjoyed quite a lot. In fact, I learned a lot about testing myself because I'm fairly new to testing. And thanks a lot for the session. We do have a few questions from the audience. So,
Yeah, so I'll be happy to take.
yeah. The first question is from Arpan. The question is that how do we test Flutter API, I mean REST APIs and with unit testing?
So basically what we do is we just go ahead and uh, we usually what we do is we create different models of it, and we need to mock that API. So if you want to test that API in real time, you can just go ahead and call it. Or if you don't want to do that, there's separate tools for it, Mockito and things like that. We can just uh, mock those implementations and see how that your basic business logic was. But the question is how you need to test REST APIs, right? So in the basic way, how you are calling APIs in your normal app itself, in the implementation of your screen. Instead of that, you need to just go ahead and call those in the test, and you need to just create different objects of how you're calling them. Let's say if you have an API repository or provider, I don't know, whatever way you're calling them, just go ahead and call that object there into your test file and see how much time that it takes. Or best way of doing this, if you want to check your business logic, again, mock it, or else you can use those tools. There are also a lot of tools like Mockito, and to be honest, I'm not aware of a lot of them, but yes, that's one of them which you can make use of while performing unit tests.
Good. Thanks a lot. I hope that answered your question, Arpan. We have another question from Arpan. Very curious lad, I believe. Um, Can you share more details about Firebase Test Lab?
Okay, so what we have to do is that we have to what I can just tell you because to be honest, I haven't done that personally as well. So or I can just tell you that you have to create that test, you have to write the test, you have to test it locally, and after that there are a set of commands that are again available on the official documentation. So if I to show you right now, I will just say I think I'm not sharing my screen. Let me just go ahead and enable that again. Yeah. So there are a number of steps of which in which way you will be able to integrate them. So what you have to do, to give you a rough idea about it, what you have to do is you just first need to create that test. Yeah, what you just need to do is that you need to create a test, test it locally, and then there are sort of commands that you need to run from. You have to separate out that testing file from your Android part of things and iOS separately, and you have to provide them to your Firebase Test Lab console, and you have to give them, and they'll just do this thing and just get that to work. So I think it will be best if you just go ahead. I'll just provide you links there. Updates to Flutter testing. I think this was an article written by the Flutter team where they showed how. Yeah, it was an article written by Flutter team how you can use Firebase Test Lab and how you will be able to mm, use it for your use case. Yeah, so here it is. Loading in APK. So we just need to configure Test Lab. It is done. Follow the instructions, and then we need to just so go ahead and generate push-us. Just go ahead and run a certain number of commands there onto your project. Just Flutter build APK and generate Android test. Then again, gradle levels, symbol debug. I think if you make use of this specific resource, I think it will be much better. I think Harsh, if you can do me a favor and somehow just provide this in the chat box, it will be
Yeah,
good.
sure, sure.
Yeah, and uh, to be honest, it's much better if you take a look at that app rather than asking because I personally do not have a lot of experience using Firebase Test Lab myself. So yeah.
Awesome, awesome. Wait just a minute. We do have while I post question. I mean the links for the doc and stuff. We do have another question from Apan, and
Mhm.
this question is that are there any advantages of the new
Yeah.
integration test packages over Flutter?
So again, the first advantage was mentioned in your previous question itself. Now we are able to use the Flutter driver package. No, no, Flutter driver, the Firebase Test Labs for it. So it was previously it was very difficult to just go ahead and do some sort of automation and CI/CD there in using Flutter driver because those tests were needed to be performed on real devices. Again, integration tests are also supposed to be run on real device itself, but right now you have ability of using Firebase Test Lab for it. Previously, it was really difficult. So that's one advantage there. The next one I think is it's a very easy and it is a lot consistent as well. So if you have taken a look at Flutter driver, so they followed a different approach of testing things and test cases were a little different as to what it were for the widget testing framework. So now it's very simple and it's consistent everywhere and you're able to test those things in a simple way. So I think that those were the two advantages that I could think of on the top of my head. But I'm sure there are a few more advantages. I think if you read this article from on Medium, then you'll be able to uh, go ahead and come across more advantages.
Awesome, awesome. Well, I guess we don't have any other questions. Let me see.
So it's just basically, I just want to mention that the integration test package is just a month old, so you won't be able to find a lot of resources for it. So what you have to do at this point is just go ahead and play around with it. And if you're able to find something that is not well known, just go ahead and create a blog post and make yourself famous. And go and live in the open source dream. Create some
Yeah, yeah,
samples, whatever you feel is best for you.
yeah, yeah. Awesome, awesome. Well, we don't have any other questions, so I guess we can wrap it up here. So thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Abdullah for taking a session. It was very insightful indeed.
Thanks for
And
having me.
oh, you're welcome. And yeah, I guess we'll see you in the next event. Thank you for joining. Stay tuned. Bye bye.
Bye.